Homegrown tomatoes are everyone's favorite, but it can be a little bit intimidating when we go to a nursery and there's so many choices out there. So I'm going to help you choose the right plant for your garden. One of the first things that you need to figure out is, do you want a determinate tomato or an indeterminate tomato? Determinate means the size is determined. They'll typically be 30 inches to 36 to 48 inches tall, and that's about it. They tend to put their fruit on all at once, and then they decline. Now, an indeterminate tomato means the size is not determined, and they can easily be 10 to 12 feet long, so they are not ideal for container plants, and they need a very serious cage to keep them supported in the garden. But they do produce a smaller amount of fruit over a longer period of time. Many times your indeterminate tomatoes that you put in March are still performing for you in December, while the determinates will have been long gone. But the determinate tomato is ideal if you're canning or want to go away for the summer and not worry about tomato plants. So I like to plant a little bit of both, but if you are growing in containers, stick with determinate varieties, and there are some determinates that are extra small, like Patio and Goliath, that are going to do well in a smaller container. I'm not a big fan of the upside down planters. Most of those are just way too small for tomatoes, and they get stressed out easily in our heat, so not something that I would choose. Now, the other thing that you'll want to look for are the letters on the labels. Many tomatoes will have letters like V, F, N, and that stands for the particular disease resistance that those tomatoes have been bred for. Now, I have root knot nematodes in my soil at Lake Austin Spa Resort, so I always look for the N, which indicates nematode resistant, so that I'll have a good crop of tomatoes. But you'll want to pay attention to that if you've had disease problems in the past, and avoid buying a tomato that's susceptible to that disease. And I'll have more information about determinate and indeterminate varieties and disease resistance information on our KLRU website for Central Texas Gardener. Now, looking at plants in the nursery, you want to avoid plants that have stunted leaves, yellowish leaves. These leaves could be easily trimmed off, but if the whole plant has leaves that are spotty or yellowing, I'd avoid that plant. Also look for purplish looking leaves and very purple stems. Now, tomatoes have a natural purplish stem near the base, but if the whole stem is purple, maybe it's been damaged by cold and it's going to be stressed. I like to buy in nurseries that have their plants protected in the nighttime, just like I'm going to do when I get them home. Now, this plant has 3 plants per pot, and that is going to be a plant that's a little bit stressed. It's crowded, so I would leave that at the nursery. If it had just one tiny additional plant, you could trim that off easily. Now, this is a nice healthy plant. It doesn't have a lot of roots protruding through the base. If you see really long roots hanging out of the bottom of the pot, it's been in that pot too long. If you see blooms on the plant, it's probably been in that pot too long. So this is a nice healthy plant. I would actually take the lower leaves off and pot this plant up in a container to about this level. And I grow them in a container because tomatoes don't like temperatures below 50 at night. So when you're still getting into that below 50-degree range, I like to have my plants in a container, have them protected in the evening. Some people will put them on a wagon and roll them out of the garage in the daytime and roll them back in at night to protect them. If you've got a greenhouse, that's ideal, but even a covered porch or patio or indoors in the evening, just to protect them, will help you jump ahead with your tomato harvest. The other important factor is that many tomatoes, especially the large fruited tomatoes, don't set fruit well when temperatures get above 90 degrees. So if you're late in putting out your tomatoes and then they have to set blooms and fruit and the temperatures start to get high, those blooms just fall off and you won't get tomato plants. So important to do this step of planting in containers early on, and so when your plants are in the containers, they're allowed to start setting blooms, and even sometimes with container tomatoes, they'll start setting fruit for you in these pots. And when I put them in the ground, I don't go too deep again, so when I put this in the ground, I would plant it at the same level it's been in the container, but I would take off these lower leaves, and that way the plant won't have diseases jumping up into the upper leaves. I also tend to avoid 6-packs. If you're just planting a few tomatoes, get some diversity in your garden. Don't plant all one species of tomatoes because you just won't have the disease pest resistance. Try to get those tomatoes hardened off by getting them adapted to being outside before you put them in the garden all at once. These steps will help you be successful with your tomato plants in your own home garden.